From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Morning Line with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on Morning Line. Nick Barris with you on a sweltering Wednesday. It's only 8 o'clock right now, and it's already heating up. So sit back, relax, and join in the program this morning. We're going to be talking legal issues, malpractice law, our monthly visit with one of the top malpractice attorneys in the entire state. Clint Kelly's with us this morning. Good morning. How are you staying cool in this weather?
Well, I'm trying to stay inside mostly. This is one of those days when you're very happy you have a job indoors.
Yeah.
Those people that work outdoors, they really earn their living this time of year.
Oh, man. You know, us in the newsroom, we have to go out and collect news and get it. But I'll tell you, there's some people out there I saw the other day, I think they were, repaving a road. Oh, God. Or doing some of the roofing work. Can you imagine? It's been so
it just adds
hot.
another 10 or 20 degrees to what it already is outside. So
I don't know. Yeah, just sit back, relax, and enjoy. Stay cool, and we're going to open up the phone lines for you, of course. Clint Kelly is a malpractice attorney, and again, this is a situation where at the beginning of each show, I'd like you to at least let the viewers know, again, malpractice. And I've got some questions for you on some other issues, but let them know if they'd like to join in the conversation. Malpractice, someone's sitting there thinking, all right, how do I know if I have a case?
Very simply, it's a medical or hospital mistake that produces a major catastrophic injury, paralysis, loss of a limb, loss of an organ, death. Mm-hmm. Those are the types of cases that we take because those patients either don't fully recover, unless, of course, they pass away, they never recover, and don't have the ability to pay their medical expenses or earn a living, and that's a situation where you want to bring a case, as opposed to some situations where there's been a medical mistake, but the injury is either temporary or practically non-existent.
Okay, so a bad result doesn't necessarily mean it's malpractice, though.
That's correct. There are situations where patients are injured and it's not the product of negligence. It's just simply a bad result because surgery, in particular, is risky business. Mm-hmm. There's no guarantee that you're going to get a good result. But with that said, in modern medicine, most surgical procedures have a very high degree of success when the standard of care is followed. So when you do have a bad result, you have to question whether or not the doctor did what the doctor was supposed to do at the time that the doctor was supposed to do it.
I'm really glad you said that. Mm-hmm. You haven't pointed that out to me in the past, but the point is, the vast majority of these surgeries, and some are riskier than others, you're going to have a positive outcome in. So if you're sitting at home and you're not sure, if you had a negative outcome, at the very least, it's worth checking it out.
Yeah, and where the rubber meets the road is when you, as a patient or family member, confront the doctor or the surgeon. And when I say confront, I mean actually discuss the problem with them and say, how this happened? Why wasn't this prevented? And the answer to those questions will oftentimes give you that gut feeling that, hey, something's not right here. Mm-hmm. And there are occasions also where the doctors will admit wrongdoing and be upfront with you. And then you have a decision to make. Is this something that I can live with and move on? Or is this something that I'm simply, as a matter of necessity, I'm going to have financial compensation to live? Mm-hmm. And that's where I get involved.
And does it always involve necessarily the actual procedure that they conduct? If a doctor does a procedure and there's supposed to be instructions on aftercare that you're supposed to do, that you're supposed to be given, and that you're supposed to follow, if they don't provide that properly, like for instance, after a certain type of surgery, you're supposed to stay in bed for 2 or 3 days, or the sutures may rip open or something, and they don't tell you that, and you went up and walk around, can that get to a level of malpractice if you're not told how to handle things after a surgery?
Yes, I mean, those are what we call discharge instructions. Okay. And usually these things are pre-printed on a page that's given to the patient or patient's family at the time that the patient's discharged. Nick, I don't run into many of those cases because the instructions are often thorough.
Pretty
and
clear.
They almost always have this caveat at the bottom. If something happens, if you're in severe pain or you have a bad reaction, go to the emergency room.
Right.
And that's the CYA part of the discharge instructions, so that there's no argument that, hey, I didn't tell the patient that they might need follow-up care if something bad happens. So I don't run into post-surgery negligence in terms of how instructions are given. Where I do have cases are post-operative management, particularly wounds where infections develop and they're not handled appropriately, or a complication develops as a result of the surgery, perhaps bleeding, often internally.
Right.
And that bleeding is either misdiagnosed or it's mismanaged. And either one of those, bleeding or infection, can cause horrible consequences, can cause death, can cause amputation, can cause paralysis. It's really the complications that are the major problem, I think, in medicine in terms of how they're handled.
Gotcha.
Or mishandled.
Or mishandled. All right. The standard of care is the key phrase he always uses. Hey, let's take a quick phone call. Already in. We're getting some calls before our first break. We'll go to Linda. Linda, good morning. Hi, Linda.
Good morning. I hope I can get through this. I had knee surgery, knee replacement Monday, and I was told that if I contacted Medicare, that they would put me in a rehab facility if I spent 3 nights in the hospital. So that's what I did. I called Medicare, talked to them, and I called the doctor's office back again. And then they sent me home yesterday without spending 3 nights in the hospital. So therefore, I cannot go to a rehab facility. I live by myself, and I have had just the roughest night and day, and I don't know what to do.
Okay, so, and you feel, when you say rough, are you having problems with the implant, or that you've just had a difficult time getting to where you need to be now?
Well, I'm at home, and it's very difficult for me to take care of myself.
Okay.
Because I live by myself, and no one here to help.
Okay, and I see. Now, this is not so much medical malpractice, but I totally sympathize with where you're coming from. It's tough. It sounds to me like Medicare is not going to cover right now for you to get into a facility or to provide any in-home health care?
No, Medicare told me that if I spent 3 nights in the hospital, that they would send me to a facility.
Yeah.
She didn't give her 3 nights, Nick. That's what she said.
Okay.
And 3 nights in the hospital.
So, yeah, because, all right, so I've heard similar people, and I just don't know.
What she's saying is the predicate for the
was the 3
Medicare
nights.
was the 3 nights, and she was deprived of the 3 nights because she was discharged prematurely. That's what she's saying, and now she's at home, not fully being taken care of, and
she can't
scared.
Sure.
Let's just call it like it is, and I feel for her. I think here's what I would do if I were her.
Okay.
I'm a firm believer in pushing the system, and if I were her, I would go back to the hospital or the facility where she was and plead or insist on admission. When someone wants to discharge you early, that is a point where you always want a patient advocate with you if you can have one. And it's always important to have that person with you who can push back on decisions that are made that are not in the patient's best interest. When someone wants to discharge you and you believe it's premature, that's when your patient advocate steps in and says, wait a minute, I want to know exactly every reason why you want to discharge my family member or my friend. I want you to lay it out to me clearly, and I want to know who I can go over your head to talk to because I disagree, particularly if there are grounds to disagree. And usually you can tell. You can say, look, my friend or my relative here is too sick to go home.
Meaning you're observing that.
Correct.
You say,
I want to put this in writing. I want someone for administration. You raise the biggest stink you can possibly raise to force that healthcare provider to keep you that extra day. And what's unfortunate about this is all she needed was another day.
I know.
So is it a malpractice case? No. Is it bad healthcare? Yes.
Yep.
And I don't care if the doctor was completely within his or her rights to discharge her a day early. I can just tell by talking to this fine lady, she needed to stay another day to get her Medicare, and I wish someone had been there fighting for her and pushing back on this decision so she could have gotten her 3rd day.
Yeah, all right. And I know she's alone right now. Maybe if there's a way to do what you said, to go back and demand something. By the way, when they discharge early, and I had a friend in California who had a serious back surgery, And they seem to have discharged him a little early. He was back home doing what they told him to do, and then he developed a bad hematoma. I mean, his leg started hurting. He was like, what's going on? They had to go back in and do an MRI and say, we got to put you back under another surgery 3 days, 4 days later. And now they said, you know what, I think we discharged you too soon. He stayed in there 3 more days to make sure a bleed didn't start again. Do they discharge you early based on standard of care, or is it sometimes like the rule of thumb, let's get him out of here as quick as we can? Because, you know, these rooms are expensive, we don't have the space, and we don't always get paid. If it's Medicare, we're not getting the money we want. We could get someone else who's paying full to come in. Why do they discharge you early?
It's supposed to be the former, but oftentimes it's the latter. In other words, they're supposed to be making decisions based on the standard care and the standard care alone, as opposed to making decisions because of economic reasons.
Yeah.
Reasons where they can make more money by letting someone out. And the doctor may have pressure, or the nurse practitioner may have pressure from the institution, hospital, facility, to get people out of there because they need to fill that bed with someone else. And that drives medical decision making. I don't care what they say. I've been through these things enough to know the standard of care is sometimes not followed in favor of getting the bed filled by someone else who's a better payer, or someone else who can fill that bed for a longer period of time.
Right.
And I want to follow up on one thing you said. You were talking about someone discharged early. The case I was talking about was a patient who developed a postoperative bleed in their spine. It was misdiagnosed as simply being diabetic foot. In other words, this person's starting to lose sensation.
Circulation.
Yeah, circulation, sensation in their legs. The doctors, the nurse practitioner, because this patient had pre-existing diabetes, the nurse practitioner took it to mean it was just simply irritation of the nerves and let this patient go. 3 days later, the patient comes back in completely paralyzed.
Oh, no.
And the thing about paralysis is if you don't intervene within 24 hours, it's permanent. And so this guy's in a wheelchair for the rest of his life because some nurse practitioner was lazy.
All right, on that note, we're going to take a break. Boy, you have to push it, man, and you have to insist. And you're right, having someone there to advocate for you if you're not able to yourself. We'll take a break. When we come back, more of our conversation with Clint Kelly. We're going to take more of your calls. If you're on hold, stay there. We'll get to you right after this.